Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for joining our third installment of Live with LifeLink. And so I see we have some viewers out there already, but before we even jump into today's broadcast, I want you to do three things. Help us out, right? So I want you to go ahead and like this post. I want you to go into the comment section, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube, and just let us know that you're here. And the last thing that we want you to do today is to share this post so that all of your friends and family can be a part of today's talk conversation. All right, we want to make sure as many people as possible get the opportunity to tune in this evening. So if you've been following us this month, you know that April is National Donate Life Month. Observed in April each year, National Donate Life Month helps to encourage Americans to register as organ, eye, and tissue donors and to honor those whose lives have been taken or honor those who've given, who have been donors. Oh, I'm sorry, guys. During this last full week of National Donate Life Month, we celebrate National Pediatric Transplant Week. This week focuses on the powerful message of ending the pediatric transplant waiting list. So during today's discussion, we will hear from three individuals who are directly connected to the cause of pediatric organ donation. And with that being said, it is time for me to introduce you guys to our three guests. So first we have joining us LifeLink of Georgia's own hospital development liaison, Miss Rebecca Luth-J. Rebecca has the unique responsibility of building and maintaining relationships with our hospital partners, specifically Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. As the HD liaison for CHOA, she is directly impactful in the world of pediatric transplantation. So welcome, Rebecca, to the conversation.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for that introduction, Tiffany. I'm putting this webinar together to raise awareness about the importance of pediatric donation and transplantation.
Thank you so much for being here. And next we have joining us today is one of LifeLink of Georgia's own volunteers, Mr. Wills Porter. Not only is Mr. Porter a volunteer with us, he is also a transplant recipient. Additionally, Mr. Porter is editor-at-large for Impact America, where their focus is to collaborate, create, and distribute relevant content to those who are currently impacted by organ tissue donation and transplantation. So welcome, Wills, to the conversation.
Thank you so much for having me tonight. I'm super excited to be on with all of you as we talk about something that's very important in pediatric transplant.
Thank you so much, Will. And last but certainly not least, we have the pleasure of being joined by another one of LifeLink of Georgia's volunteers, Mrs. Pepper Helms. And Pepper is one of our special volunteers. Not only is she a volunteer, but she is also a donor mom. And so we're looking forward to hearing her take or hearing it from her about how pediatric transplantation has directly impacted her life. So welcome, Pepper, to the conversation.
Thanks for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
All right. And so before we dive into the conversation, I wanted to provide you guys with some information about pediatric donation. So in 2020, more than 1,700 children received life-saving transplants, matched from nearly 900 pediatric donors. So that means 900 children died and were able to be donors. Currently, there are 1,900 children on the national transplant waiting list. More than 500 children waiting for a donor are between the ages of 1 and 5 years old. While the donors ranged in age from newborns to 17 years old, most were between 11 and 17 years old. Though in 2020, more than 120 pediatric organ donors were babies under the age of 12 months. So every year, thousands of pediatric cornea and tissue donors help restore sight and save and heal lives. And so that information, guys, you can find it on Donate Life America. It's public information that's out there. Before we dive into Pepper and Will's story, I want to first start with you, Rebecca, and I want you to tell us a little bit about what it is that you do and how it's integral in what we do in organ and tissue donation. Because I think oftentimes when people think about someone being a donor, they may only think about maybe the surgeon or the nurses that are taking care of the patients. But there are a lot of people that work in the background to make this happen. And your role is very important to that process. So can you tell the viewers a little bit about what you do and how it relates to organ and tissue donation?
Absolutely. So as Tiffany said, my name is Rebecca Luth J, and I am a hospital development liaison. So I'll talk a little bit about the liaison role before I get into specifically pediatrics, but there's about 17 of us on my team, and we cover the entire state of Georgia and every hospital in between. So we act as professional educators in the healthcare system, and really are just trying to connect with staff, educate on the process of when to potentially identify a patient that would be a candidate for organ donation before we do the medical evaluation. And so I'm in essence kind of the face of donation for the hospitals that I serve. I work with a few hospitals in the Atlanta area, and of course, CHOA is one of them. We work with Eggleston, Scottish Rite, and Hughes Spalding, and Eggleston is a transplant center. And so when we work, we're trying to create these lasting legacies for these donor families. We are working to commemorate these patients and then to potentially get that waiting list down to zero. As you had said a little bit about the transplant pediatric waiting list, at Eggleston, it will range typically around 60 patients waiting for that life-saving organ. So really trying to get that number down to zero and get all those kids transplanted.
All right. So when you're in the hospital, because you do go in, right, to do rounds and that type of thing, can you just tell us what is it like in the hospital? What is the atmosphere like? Because I imagine there's a lot of emotions going on, just the idea that a child has to die in order for another child to receive a transplant. So can you just tell us a little bit about the energy or the environment, what it's like being in the hospital on a regular basis?
Yes, and so I'm primarily in the critical care areas of the hospital. So really working with those pediatric nurses, that bedside staff, those physicians involved in the care. And we call them donation champions. Those are our people that are familiar with the process, and they are such big advocates on the unit, and really just creating a culture of supportive of donation. We understand that these cases, they're emotional, they're hard. The loss of a child is one that, no parent is ever prepared for, but really trying to make sure that both sides are seen of the process and allowing that family to make that decision if they would want their child to donate.
Okay. I can't even imagine being in the hospital in your role, seeing all that's going on, especially knowing what's happening in the background, as a representative of LifeLink. And I want to turn to you, Pepper, because she mentioned briefly about families in critical care. So can you tell us your story, Pepper? Let us tell the viewers how you became a donor mom and what that's been like for you.
Sure, absolutely. Do you want me to tell the circumstances of how we got to that point?
If you're comfortable telling me.
Okay. This happened in 2001, and I took my 3 kids to a park to play. They were 2, 4, and 6. My youngest daughter, her name was Hannah. She was a 2-year-old. And so I was on the playground with them. And she was going down a slide, and a tree branch broke off and fell and hit both of us, actually. I didn't realize she had gotten hurt initially until I saw her later laying on the ground, and she had been hit by the tree branch in her head. And because I was injured as well, could not get to her, they ended up life-flighting her to Scottish Rite, and I had to go to another hospital for a few hours, and then I was able to get there long story short, after about a week of being in a coma and just a lot of intervention on the part of the wonderful doctors and nurses at Scottish Rite, they told us that she was brain dead, and then was approached by the doctors and a LifeLink volunteer about donating our daughter's organs.
Wow. And so we often, in educating the public, and we're talking about brain death versus a cardiac death. And so when they told you that your daughter was brain dead, what was your immediate thought, if you're comfortable sharing that with us? Because I often wonder, I had a similar experience with my father. When we found out that he was brain dead, it was almost like, you don't want to believe it. Like, no, I remember, he was having some movement in his fingers. And so we're like, well, no, that's not what's happening. And so can you tell us, when the doctor gave you that news, what was your first thought or reaction?
That's a good question. So every day that she lived, we got a little bit more encouraged. And again, this was 20 years ago. So I think maybe things were done. I don't know if things were done differently or not, but maybe communication was not as good. But so I think by the time she had made it like 72 hours, I think we were feeling pretty confident that she was going to at least make progress. We didn't know what that was going to look like. But I felt like we were making progress because she was still alive. Of course, she was still in a coma, still on a ventilator. Her intracranial pressure was still not in a great range. So she died on a Sunday morning, on Easter morning. And so on Saturday when we left, things seemed fine. So we came in the hospital Sunday morning and everything was different. So it was kind of a shock at that point. I just kind of felt like things were going good. And then all of a sudden we came in and he just said, barring a miracle, she's not going to survive. And so it was kind of a shock in that sense, because I just kind of felt like we were moving in a different direction. However, when we went back to see her, I think we could just feel that her soul was not there. And, so it all kind of made a little bit more sense. She wasn't moving at all. So it was, like I said, it was Easter. So the doctor recommended that they had to do a lot more tests and get second opinions and all these things. And so he recommended we just leave for a while and go be with our other kids for Easter. And so we did that, which seems crazy, but we left for a few hours to be with our other kids and then came back that night. And they just talked to us a little bit more about organ donation and then what would happen the next day.
Wow. I honestly, Pepper, I can't even imagine. And I can't imagine being that generous. Honestly, I don't know that I would be able to be that generous. So, in that moment, when the LifeLink of Georgia person came in and talked to you, there has to be something that happens in your mind that made you say yes. You know what I'm saying? So, what was that thing that gave you the strength to say, you know what? I'm losing my daughter, but someone else has an opportunity to have a better life. And so what was the deciding factor for you in that very moment?
To be honestly, my husband and I were both like the perfect people to approach about this because, well, first of all, both of our mothers were nurses. This was something we both talked about. Most of our married life about for each other. We never considered we'd have to make this decision for our child. So, we've always just had we've already made this decision for ourselves. So when it came to offering her organs, it really wasn't, we thought about it for maybe a minute. It's hard in that place because you don't want to be, it's a very hard place to be selfless. But at the same time, you feel powerless. So this kind of gives you an opportunity to have a little bit of decision making and how to make at least one good thing come out of this really bad situation. And so that's really the way that we looked at it we just looked at each other and we just said yes. So again, I don't know that many people were like us, but it wasn't something that we really, we'd have to do a whole lot of soul searching. We just knew we knew logically that she didn't need her organs and so why would we not, give the gift of life to someone who could use them?
And so what would you say gave you strength to move forward in that decision, and really strength to move forward every day? I can't imagine, even though it was 20 years ago, it's probably something that's still very fresh for you, just as a mom. So what has given you strength to keep going, and even in that moment to just press on?
Gosh, that's a good question too. I think in that moment and in the moments to come is that I still had 2 children that I was a mom of, and they deserved my love, my affection, my interaction, so I felt like they gave me a lot of strength to move forward. I still was a wife. We still had a business, and so moving forward after her death, again, that gave us a lot of strength. We're a very spiritual family and believe that God, gives all of us a certain number of days. And that was in his will for her to only live for 2.5 years. And while that was hard to take and hard to accept, that's just kind of what we clung to. And I think, again, in that moment, just the strength that we had some power to make a decision, to make something good come of it. And since we had that's the one thing we could do. That gave us a lot of strength to do so.
Yeah, we have another volunteer who speaks often. She's another donor mom. And one of the things that she always says is that God has given us interchangeable parts. For some reason, that's what helped her when trying to decide, whether her son would be a donor. She just kept that in her mind and was able to make a decision. Yeah. And so with that being said, Rebecca, you're in the hospitals, like I said. And so what are some of the hurdles and obstacles that you see in the hospital as it relates to the whole organ donation process? Like, can you talk about that just a little bit? Because I'm sure our family care coordinators we don't have one of them on the call today, but they're also very important when it comes to bridging this decision. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the hurdles that you've seen in the hospital?
Yeah, of course. And I think obviously it kind of comes down to the myths and misconceptions that are out there about donation. And so, like you said, our family care coordinators, they are the experts. They are trained to talk to families about donation in a compassionate, sensitive way, and kind of even how they approach walking into that conversation. They want to make sure that there's an understanding there that the family has about the diagnosis before bringing up donation, because the timing of that conversation is especially important when determining that approach for that family and that patient. Wow. And so I think one of the biggest myths out there is about, an open casket viewing. I think we see this in adult hospitals along with pediatric hospitals. And so, a family might think that if their loved one's a donor, that they can't have a viewing. And so that's something, there's different things like that, could be a reason a family objects to donating, that our family care coordinators, they'll work very closely with the families to kind of see what that hesitation is, what question is holding up that decision, so that family can make an informed decision about donation and not have any regrets later on. Because I think we have seen it where a family said no at first and then eventually came back and, wish that they had donated. And we don't ever want a family to have that regret moving forward. Often for pediatrics, I think timing does play a role in, if they've got family from out of town that's there. Our donor cases can sometimes last 24 to 72 hours before we go to recover those organs in the OR. So it really just is working with the family and accommodating any of their needs for donation to be able to fulfill that wish.
Stephanie Welling is saying, "Hey, Rebecca."
Stephanie is one of our champions over at Scottish Rite, and so she's a great support and advocate for donation. She's been over at Scottish for a while, so thank you for tuning in, Stephanie.
Yes, thank you. And so Pepper, she mentioned some of those misconceptions. And I know that you said you and your husband were the perfect people to approach about donation. But when you had to make your decision at any point, did any of those things come to mind? Some of the things that you hear about organ and tissue donation?
No, they really didn't. I knew, especially since she had a head injury, although it wasn't disfiguring in any way. Excuse me. That it would be an issue to have an open casket. So no, I didn't really have those hesitations at all. Like I said, just not knowing, just kind of it would have been great if there was a little bit more time to digest the fact that she wasn't going to make it.
Okay, wow. And so I really was I don't know what happened to Will's. I think he may have some internet issues. But I do want to talk to you again, Pepper. When it comes to once the transplant happens and things kind of settle down, I've heard a lot of stories from transplant recipients who have wanted to be in contact with their donors. Have you been in contact with anybody that benefited from your daughter's donation?
Yeah, we have. I think fairly quickly, within the first year, we got several letters from several different people. And then I have a really great story about this. About 2 or 3 years, about 2 years after my daughter's name was Hannah, after she died, we were actually on the Today Show because she was injured in a playground. July is actually National Playground Safety Awareness, in which we didn't know that. So they had a story, and we had actually worked with an attorney due to the conditions of the playground. And so he was on the Today Show and shared our story, and then we were interviewed on it. And so our donor, the girl that received Hannah's heart, her mother's friend was watching the show, and she put 2 and 2 together with the timing and where we were. She ended up calling the attorney that was on the show and asked if she could meet us. And he offered his office and, checked her out, make sure it was, a legit story and, made sure it was okay with us. And so we ended up meeting her and meeting the daughter who received her heart about a few years later. So that was just a really bittersweet moment to meet her and her family. But just to see that she was doing great and she was healthy, and just a really special day. And she's still, doing fantastic today, and she's 21 years old. So
wow,
that was a really neat experience for us.
Do you know how many people your daughter was able to help?
Yes, I think it was 4. Someone got her kidneys and her heart. Her lungs were not able to be donated, and her liver, and then I think her corneas.
Okay. And so that makes me ask too, because oftentimes, so you can be an organ donor and not a tissue donor. Was Hannah also a tissue donor?
I never heard anything about that, so I really don't know the answer to that question.
Oh, wow. Because if she was a tissue donor, I would imagine she would probably have been able to help, a whole lot more people.
Yeah, I don't know why not. I just don't remember that being specifically noted.
Okay.
Well,
wow.
Again, many years ago. So.
Wow. And so I still don't see. Oh, I think Wills is coming back.
I hope so.
I think Wills is coming back. But Rebecca, while Will gets situated, I wanted to ask you also relationship. So that is a really big part of what you have to do in your role. Without our hospital partners, without CHOA, without any hospital in the state of Georgia, we won't get a referral. So we won't know that there's a potential donor at that hospital. So what are some of the things that you have to do in your role to make sure that we have a solid relationship with CHOA so that they're comfortable with coming to us with referrals? And I guess even if there's some things that maybe didn't go right in the background, that they're comfortable with letting you know about that. So what are some of the big things that you do to maintain relationships with the hospitals?
Thank you for that question, Tiffany. Really, it just all comes down to being good partners. So having ongoing communication, ongoing education, consistent follow-up on a referral that maybe didn't go according to process, and really just being able to kind of sit down and collaborate about, okay, well, what can we do better next time? It's the collaboration that really can drive us forward. I know that we really try to incorporate staff in our donation initiatives, so that, you know, they do want to keep making those referral calls and continuing to work with us and to offer families that option of donation. At CHOA, something that's really special and really taken off in the past 3 years is the honor walk that they do. Some of y'all might be familiar with that from social media and seeing it kind of got swept across the United States. And so each hospital has their own initiatives that they'll do to honor their donors, but this is going to be a hospital-driven initiative due to their resources and their process in offering it to families. And so whenever there is a donor, as the patient's being transported to the OR for recovery, staff, family members, friends will line the hallways to honor those gifts that that patient's giving. And so we really did see this just sit with staff a lot, because that's who's caring for the patient as well. So for them to be able to take a moment and say thank you and to support that family in those moments, it really does go a long way. And then it continues on to a flag raising outside. So really just trying to, you know, work together to provide the best possible care for that family and that patient, and then also the staff involved too.
Yeah, and for those of you who are viewing who may not be familiar with an honor walk, you can just go to YouTube and Google honor walks. It's a very sacred time, and if you're okay with having a few tears, I recommend that you go see it. I can't get through one without crying, so it's just a very special, intimate moment. And so, and a testament to Rebecca's relationship. On a side note, last week we had Chalk Day, and because of her relationship with CHOA, we were able to have an artist come and do a mural outside of the pavilion over at CHOA. And had she not had a relationship with them, I don't think we would have been able to do it. So kudos to you, Rebecca, and the hard work that you're putting in building those solid relationships for us over at CHOA. And
well,
I'm sorry.
Sorry, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
I mean, April is Donate Life Month. And so that's a time where we really can get together with staff and, you know, take time to celebrate those recipients that are transplanted over at Eggleston. And then also, you know, have some moments to honor those families that made that decision to donate. So last week was Spirit Week. That's always a really busy one for us. We kicked off the week with a flag raising at each campus on Monday. And then had some donation awareness tables with some PICU nurses that staffed it. So really just having donor resource nurses just kind of help out, be resources on the unit if we can't be there all the time, so that they have that donation support. And so April is always a busy month, but it's one that we look forward to. And like you said, Chalk Day was a lot of fun, being able to kind of just get out and look at the mural and take a moment to say thank you. Obviously, with COVID, the pandemic this year did look a little different than previous years, but it was nice to be back out with the hospital partners and celebrate Donate Life Month. We didn't get that last April, so it was, I think the liaisons across the state would all say that, you know, it was nice to be out there in person, raising the Donate Life flag and honoring those families and those patients.
Yeah, and me, it was nice for me to be able to be on campus. There were so many people who wanted to get close and take pictures, and it was just a really cool time. And so I see we have Mr. Wills back.
Yes, I am back.
All right, so Wills, we've already talked to Pepper, and she's given us a perspective or her experience as a donor mom. Can you tell our viewers about your experience as a transplant recipient, how that started for you?
Sure. So what really started my journey was really from birth. Shortly after I was born, something just wasn't right. Just wasn't really any lab tests or anything, but just something seemed off. I was normal for a little bit, and then shortly thereafter, some issues started coming up. To make a very long story short, ended up going to Ohio to be evaluated for potential transplant. Tests were run, etc. And ultimately, what was determined was that I needed a transplant. And this was 2.5 or so at the time, or leading up to it. And so, after being on the list for a little while, we got the phone call, and the liver was ready. And we went up to Children's Healthcare of Atlanta at Eggleston. And the procedure was started, things were going well, and went into a cardiac arrest. And so the transplant procedure was called off, and that did a lot of damage neurologically, psychologically, et cetera, just for my parents as well. And so really by the time my transplant day came, ultimately January 1st, 2000, we were all very ecstatic, that I had made strides in recovery, that I had gotten my second chance at life. And I'm just thankful for the opportunity to have that second chance, because I know, unfortunately, that not everyone does. And that's something that I know that, whether you're a donor family, whether you're a donor parent, whether you're a recipient family, that kind of sticks in the back of your mind. And so really from the recipient perspective, something that I really try to talk about a lot, it's coming from the perspective of a second chance, which is that's what it is. And really not only having that second chance at life and being thankful for it, but also being thankful and understanding for what that cost of life is, because there is a cost to it. My life was gained because another was lost. And I think that ultimately in Donate Life Month, of what, everyone at LifeLink has tried to do, and what we're trying to do on this webinar tonight, is really shed light into how challenging of a process that can be, but ultimately all of the wonderful and great good that can come from pediatric transplant.
And I think you just celebrated 30 years, right? Post-transplant?
21.
21 years. Okay.
Yes. I'll get there. I'll get there eventually.
Yeah, I was just say I gave you a few more years there.
I'll take it.
So tell us, you may have been too young to know this or to remember, but there has to be some emotion attached to the fact that you're getting a transplant, right? You're getting your second chance, but someone's child, someone is losing their life. So if maybe you don't remember what that felt like, but did your parents ever talk about that, how that was for them as a transplant recipient?
We have. There was obviously something that weighed on their mind. I'm actually in the process, and I might be going ahead in the questions or addressing something else, but I'm trying to get in contact with the donor family. And something that I kind of went through during that process was, coming to terms with that and understanding, now that I'm older, now that I understand more of exactly what happened. I knew it and knew of it as a child, but, in my adult years, really coming to terms with that. And something that I wrote, basically my perspective of it is that, and on my view, January 1st, 2000 was life-changing for me, but it was also life-changing for my donor family in a very different way. And how so often in those difficult times, it can be very tempting, and I wouldn't blame anyone, to get bogged down in the emotion, to get bogged down in all of those things, and understand decision, or sometimes easy, depending on which it is, to make that decision and say yes to donation. Ultimately, it comes down to that. And so growing up, and my parents obviously.
Uh-oh. Okay, we lost him again. But he actually was coming to a point that we would eventually get to. And that point is making the decision to be an organ and tissue donor, saying yes to donation. And so I guess I can turn to you, Pepper. Can you tell us if you could speak to a family, maybe a family that's at CHOA, or maybe it's not a pediatric donor, but maybe there's a family who has just been told their loved one is brain dead, and they are, contemplating whether or not they're going to move forward with the donation process. Is there something that you could offer to them to help them in making their decision?
Yes. Before I get to that, I would love to just say, and to any donor recipients out there, that I know that is something that donor recipients and their families must think about, in terms of someone had to die for them to live. And I would just like to say, as a donor mom, that I look at it as two separate events. Like, you don't have an opportunity at life because my daughter died. My daughter died, and that's one event. And giving a gift of life is a separate event. And it just happened to work out. So it's not like my daughter's death was the cause. Like, you didn't cause my daughter to die in order for you to get life. So I just always like to share that, because I don't have one bit of, ill feelings towards them, or it's just the opposite. It's just joy. So I just want to share that. If you are someone who is faced with this decision, and maybe it's a struggle for you, I guess my first thought would just, to say how very sorry I am that you're facing this difficult decision. It's something you never asked for, never thought you would have to be faced with. And I think because you're not only dealing with this imminent death of your child or your loved one, you're now faced with this big decision. So it's hard to make big decisions when we're in an emotional situation. So if you're not in that situation right now, I would my recommendation and suggestion would be let's talk about it before you get into that situation. But if you are there, I don't know. I just think maybe just taking a deep breath, at least being open-minded enough to think about it. If it's something that's difficult for you, especially if it's a religious situation where you feel like, where there's lots of issues with that, just remember that this is giving you the power and the privilege to give life. And that makes your child or your loved one's life count for something, if nothing else. And so that is just something that gives me hope and gives me joy to live in all the days since then, is that I can look and know in my heart there's somebody out there walking around that's got a piece of my child in her or him. And that just gives me so much, I don't know, just joy, and makes her life worth something. It continues to make her life worth something. Again, go back to the fact that we logically don't need organs to rot in the ground. And so, my question was always, why not? Why should we not do this? And I couldn't think of any reason why you wouldn't. That's just the bottom line, what it came down to for me. And then if you focus on those two things, that it can give you joy and purpose, and that there's no reason not to, then it kind of makes it an easy decision, in my opinion.
And I can't, even though your daughter was only 2 years old, I can imagine that now you must be proud of her, for what she's been able to do. She now has a legacy.
Absolutely.
That's even outside of your family. You know what I'm saying? And just the fact that there is someone out there that is benefiting from the decision that you guys made. I can't imagine, even though she was 2 years old, I would probably have so much pride in my child. And so Will isn't back yet, but since we have a little bit more time, since he's not sharing his story, tell us a little bit about Hannah. I mean, I know we're talking about her as a donor, and I know she was only 2 years old, but I have a 10-month-old that has a donor. And so I can imagine, what was she like?
Oh, but of course, she was the baby at the time. I was able to have another child after her, but she was really just a sweet mama's girl, really attached to my hip, and she wasn't talking a whole lot even at 2 years old, but just a sweet. I just had to look at her, in the wrong way, and she'd be, "I'm sorry," just very obedient and just precious. Just had a really sweet spirit about her, and just loved being the baby of the family.
And oftentimes, because you mentioned your children, and you mentioned your husband before, what I've heard stories about is sometimes people don't have the full support of their families
Yeah.
when they're making this decision. And so I know you and your husband were on the same team, but what about extended family? How did they react to the decision of you choosing for your child to be a donor?
Yeah, I can imagine that's very difficult if you're not on the same page with your spouse. I wish I had some advice about that, but again, I said my mother was a nurse and my husband's mom was a nurse. So when I told my mom, she immediately just started crying that we were donating, and she was just like, "Oh, God bless you." That's just what came out of her mouth, and I still remember that. That's one of the things I remember. Because I think she thought that was so special, and she knew what that would mean. And so, yeah, everybody was on board and, gave us the seal of approval. So we did not have to deal with any issues with the family. So I think that was a huge plus in our favor. And you, Rebecca, you mentioned your the honor walk, and that's not something that we did at the time. And I just think that is just one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen, and would have loved to have gone through that. But I will say, I remember going in the hospital Saturday morning before she died, and Friday night had been a very hard night. Her blood pressure and brain pressure were just inversely going at it. And literally they were sweating when I walked in the room. They were working so hard with, doing all the things that they could do. And I don't know how many hours they had been doing it, but the one thing that makes me cry is just thinking about those nurses and doctors who worked so hard to do all they could for her. And that's just really special to me. And they were very sweet when we came in to say our goodbyes. And so even though we didn't have an honor walk, we were able to, they let us lay with her and took a piece of her hair and gave us a box to put everything in. So we had just as much honor, and it just wasn't in a very public way. But I just, I think some of those nurses still work there. I know one of them does. But they're just wonderful people, and I'm just so grateful for them and how they ministered to me during that time, because whenever I was around Hannah in the hospital, because she could hear my voice, that her ICP would go up. So I always didn't really want to be in there. I didn't want to say much because I wanted her to be calm. I'm just so glad they were there, taking care of her. Of course, my husband was in there a lot, and I was still injured, so it was difficult for me to get around, but I'm just really grateful for that group of people.
Yeah, nurses are angels. They help us and family members. And you think particularly about people who are in ICU and critical situations. Nurses have to balance so much, and trying to be compassionate while trying to get the job done. So
exactly.
Commendable nurses, I'm sure. So do you keep in contact with any of those people?
Just one of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I can imagine. Hopefully, they're tuning in today, and they can.
Yeah, I hope so.
Hear you.
Hey, Lynn.
So you were.
Tag her.
Right. There is a comment very touching from Trish Phillips that says, "Very touching story from Pepper, and remarkable that they were connected from the Today Show."
That really was crazy.
Yeah. That's. I mean, it's just I can't even. And I'm thinking, fast forward to now. Talk about an honor walk. Are there things that you guys do now to honor your daughter? I mean, as for your children, even though their sister's no longer here, do you guys keep her memory alive in any particular way?
We really don't. I got to say, we're pretty bad about that. I think as the years have waned. My husband passed away 8 years ago, and then my mom died too. So we'd be honoring people all the time.
Wow.
But my mom's birthday is the same day as Hannah's, so we do tend to make that day really special and have cake and go out to dinner and just celebrate their lives together. So.
Wow. So I had no idea that your husband passed away. So
Then,
how are you?
oh goodness, I'm a mess. I'm just kidding.
No, you're keeping yourself together. I had no idea.
Yeah, it's just again the situation where you just have to do what you have to do, and so I still had some youngish kids. My kids were 12, 10, 16, and 18 when my husband died, and so we just I had a business to run and sell, and so we just kind of kept on going. And I probably had a little breakdown about 2 years ago, and got through had some hard things I had to deal with, but we all have stuff that we've been given that we have to deal with, and I don't think one's necessarily harder than the other. It's just making sure that you're taking care of yourself emotionally and getting counseling if you need it. That was a godsend for me, and just working and taking care of those kids that you still have. So
yeah, and thank you for
inspiring, Pepper.
What's that?
I'm sorry.
Your strength is inspiring, Pepper.
Oh, thank you.
I know, and just thank you for being a volunteer with us, even at LifeLink. I mean, just sharing your story, and I had no idea. So even though I'm 8 years late, my condolences to you and your family, on all the loss that you've experienced. But I'm sure there's some bright lights at the end of the tunnel for you. Just being here today, you're encouraging some people. I'm seeing all the comments that are coming in. So you're encouraging some people. You're encouraging me today.
I'm glad.
Yeah. And so speaking about our volunteers, Rebecca, oftentimes our volunteers want to know, what are some things that I can do to help? And I know we're in COVID now, so maybe before volunteers can come to the hospital and help out in any kind of way, are there things that our volunteers or just the public can do to kind of help make your job a little easier in the hospital setting? Are there things we can do?
I mean, I would really like to highlight our volunteers because y'all are incredible. I know with the pandemic, we've been using guest speakers and our volunteers as speakers virtually. And the hospital staff, they love to hear from y'all. When they say goodbye, they want to hear how you're doing. They want to know kind of what that outcome was for you. And to be able to hear that during that time, that dark time, that donation was a way to make it positive. That was a positive outcome that could come from it, as they're still living on. So we really do appreciate all of the work that our volunteers do for us. Prior to COVID, I think we used to bring them out to the unit so you could talk to them in person, hear about maybe their transplant recipient story, or about your loved one that donated. In terms of the public, Pepper, I think you hit on it earlier, is having that conversation. Let your loved ones know what your wish would be. It's better to hear it from you than it is coming from us later down the line if it's registered to be an organ donor. And really just the awareness aspect to organ and tissue donation. So I know Donate Life Month, we really try to get out in the hospitals and the communities and raise that awareness, but it's a conversation that's worth having.
Yeah, very, very much so. That's often, in public affairs, one of the things that we do is educating the public, because people don't realize that you have the power to start this conversation early. I know we have one of our volunteers, her son started having the conversation with her that he wanted to be a donor when he was a child. And so we can make impressions even on our youth to talk about this. It's one of those things. It's a very hard conversation. It's a very hard concept even to wrap your head around. I'm sure Pepper can attest to that, as far as you never would have thought that, you would be saying goodbye to your child, and so you probably would have never thought about, should my child be a donor? But things happen, life happens, and it's better to have the conversation ahead than not know what you're going to do if the situation comes up. Then again, you never know what it would be like for you. Like I said myself, I don't know if I could be that generous. I don't know, because I don't know where my head would be. I don't want to even think about it. But just working at LifeLink, it forces you to think about it. Being a part of this community now, it forces me to think about it. So as many people as I can tell register to be a donor, you have the potential to save lives, to enhance lives. And so throw all those misconceptions out the door, come join us in a class and learn about why these things aren't true. We want you all to make decisions that are informed, and you can't make an informed decision based on what grandma said 15 years ago about what happens when you pass away. People have this idea that, that we're just chasing behind ambulances looking for organs. It doesn't work like that. And so we're getting to the end of our broadcast, and I don't know if Wills is coming back, but I wanted to end just with you guys, just leaving some final remarks. So maybe we'll start with you, Rebecca, as far as if there's anything that you can tell to the public today, to the viewers that are watching, what can they do besides registering to be a donor? Do you recommend, should they talk to their family members? What is one thing that you would leave our viewers with today, if you could, one message?
I would say, honestly, on a daily basis, I'm continually surprised by the strength of our donor families, especially working with CHOA. I've seen it more times than not when a family will also bring up donation first before we even speak with them. And their thoughts are, if I could help another parent going through the same position I'm in, it's not a question. And so just truly amazed by the strength of our donor families, the selfless gift that they're giving, the generosity. Having that conversation is so important. And then I would just, if you're on the fence, if you have questions, do some research, talk to people who have the information in order for you to make that informed decision. Because it does matter. It's legacy we're talking about, it's continued life. And so those are kind of my closing remarks to it. In terms of registering to be an organ donor, I think the statistics, they speak for themselves. The need is so high. And on a personal level, I would just want my loved ones that are still living to know that, my heart was still beating in someone else, or my lungs were still breathing air, to give them the comfort to move forward, knowing that that's what I would have wanted.
I think those are wonderful words to encourage people to register. What about you, Pepper? What is one thing you would say? I mean, life has gone on for you. It's been 20 years. What are some last words you would say to our viewers today?
Well, I guess my heart is pretty tender because she did die in April. April 16th was the day she donated. And then because of the loss I've had, I guess I would just ditto absolutely everything Rebecca said. I mean, just have that conversation. Don't be in an emotional situation where you feel like you can't make a decision. And I would just say, live every day as best you can. Every day can't be beautiful and wonderful, but don't miss an opportunity to tell those you love that you love them.
Any regrets for you, Pepper?
Gosh, no, I wouldn't say so. No.
Yeah, I mean, you not only is your story inspiring, but just thinking about all the trauma that you've gone through and your ability to tell your story in such a beautiful way. We just appreciate you being willing to do that today. And although Mr. Wills isn't on, I do know if you find him on Facebook, he is very, outside of LifeLink of Georgia, he is very active in the transplant community. His goal is to spread the word for people to register to be organ and tissue donors. I know I can't speak for him, but I've been a part of some of his broadcasts, and this is a very near and dear. Oh my goodness, he's popping back in. But this is a very near and dear cause for him. So much so he's doing his master's degree right now.
Oh, wow.
And I know that part of one of the projects that he's doing, it has to do with organ and tissue donation. And I think he's going to be a social worker. So again, I just want to take this opportunity. Wills is popping back. I don't know.
I just said I loved hearing his story. I hate that he wasn't able to get back on.
I know. And I think the another awesome thing is that you all are all connected through CHOA. I mean, you could have been a donor from another state that moved here, but I think it's very telling and very powerful that your daughter was a donor at CHOA. Wills received a transplant at CHOA, and now Rebecca is at CHOA building these amazing relationships so that doors could be open for someone like me to come in and try to spread the word. So again, I just want to say thank you to all of you for joining us today, to Rebecca, Pepper, Wills, even though I see he's kind of blacked out there, but thank you guys for taking time out of your day to join us as panelists. I truly hope that people watch this and got something from it, because I did. If not for nothing, I'm walking away truly inspired, professionally, Rebecca, and personally, Pepper and Will. So thank you to all of the viewers that are out there. Thank you guys for tuning in. I know it's dinner time and we don't want to take up your evening. Check the comments. Pepper, are you in touch with Hannah's recipients? We had a question from Emily. Oh, Emily, thanks for joining. We just talked. Have you been in touch with any of the recipients? She's sorry if you mentioned that before, but she missed it.
I have, yes. We met the little girl that got my daughter's heart, and then got letters from 3 others that received her liver and kidneys, and they're both doing really well. All of them are doing really well today.
Okay. Oh, Wills, you're back. It's a challenge. See what happens when you're trying to do something good and you're trying to get the word out. You know, all these little things try to happen, but here you are. Do you have any closing remarks? I started to tell the viewers about some of the initiatives you had going on, but is there anything you wanted to close out and say, Wills?
First of all, apologies for the issues. Kind of for closing, I just want to say thanks to everybody who's on here. Obviously, this is a very important topic. Thank you to you, Ms. Tiffany, for extending this opportunity for us and for the work that you're doing.
Poor guy.
No. He fell off again. So first he called me ma'am, and now I'm Miss. I'll take Miss Tiffany. But yeah, I don't know if he's coming back in. We have another comment from Cheryl Gay. Hey, Cheryl, that's another one of our amazing volunteers. She said, thank you for hosting and having this great live. So many comments. I'm sorry if I missed any of them, guys. It's kind of hard to read all the comments. I know Ruth Duncan Bell. Okay, Pepper, Tiffany, Rebecca, thanks for sharing this important information. Organ donors save lives. Thank you, Ruth, for joining us. Oh man, Will is back. Frank Tay, thank you for sharing. Thank you for such caring, moving stories. Also, nurses and staff, a tearful panel event. Thanks, Tiffany. Great job. Well, I don't need any kudos. Everything goes to our wonderful panelists for joining us today. And so we'll go ahead and close out, guys. Will, do you want to try and say something else again? Come on, Will. Don't be discouraged. Go ahead.
I think he's muted.
There we go. No, I think that, from what all y'all have been talking about and just kind of some of the initiatives that I'm doing in LifeLink, encourage everybody to, learn more about life.
Wow. And there is a comment.
Just thank you all so much for being on, and enjoy the rest of the month. And if you haven't already, go ahead and register to be an organ tissue donor and get involved with LifeLink however you can.
Okay. And I know we're closing out, guys, but there was a comment that we missed that I wanted to share from Cazette Marie. She says, I've been having a hard time losing my child. He was 16 years old when I lost him. Sometimes I ask myself, why me? Why did this happen to me? Like it's my fault that I lost him. Everyone told me he would be okay. So now I don't believe anyone when they tell me everything will be okay. Now I know we're closing, but Pepper, as a mom who's lost a child, can you speak directly to Ms. Hernandez today?
Oh gosh, I'll try. No one told me that Hannah was going to be okay, but I do understand that feeling because both my mom and my husband died from cancer, and you see people get healed from cancer or get better from cancer, and these three most amazing people in my life, the answer was no, they're not going to be okay. They didn't make it. So I do understand what it feels like, that resentment and bitterness when you see other people get better or be better and you don't understand why that didn't happen in my case. And so that's been a really difficult journey. And I've kind of put off for many years dealing with that anger. And I would just encourage you, if you could, if you have the capacity, or if you can find a good counselor, that's helped me tremendously. A church leader, someone that you can trust, just to be honest with yourself and with God, if you believe in God. Just being honest with your feelings. And I think a lot of times when we actually feel that pain and feel and talk about our true emotions, that's when it starts to dissipate and get better.
Right. And Cosette, I have never lost a child, so I can't even imagine what you're going through. And I'm not sure what your connection is to organ and tissue donation, but from talking to some of our donor parents, just being active in an organization as a volunteer like LifeLink has helped them tremendously. So if you're interested in joining us, it is a family where there are people here who have been where you stand. And so it might be helpful for you if you're interested to join us. But we're sending you virtual hugs and words of encouragement. I know Tris Phillips has sent some virtual hugs to you, Cosette. So we hope that you're feeling them. And we hope that maybe today you feel a little bit more encouraged from watching today's broadcast. And any more comments? Oh, wow. We had a viewer from Puerto Rico. Wow. Walamina Sanchez. Hopefully I didn't butcher your name there. I took French in high school, so I'm not really good in Spanish, and I often mess up people's names and words. But again, thank you guys for joining us today. We appreciate you guys. And if you have any questions, you can reach me at LifeLink. I can give you guys my email. It's t.moore@lifelinkfoundation.org. And again, like, comment, and share. This post will be up. You can still share the information with people who maybe weren't able to view it live. So with that being said, I'm not going to take you guys to church. All hearts and minds are clear. Thank you guys for participating. You guys have an amazing night and enjoy the rest of National Donate Life Month. Find a way to celebrate. Okay, guys? Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Tiffany.
Thank you.